Okay, folks, it's 4 o'clock and we have a quorum, so we'll start the meeting. There's a little confusion about physical arrangements for the meeting. We're actually broadcasting here from the conference room. The conference room is eventually going to get shortened substantially, and the construction is going on all around us, but it turned out it didn't actually affect the conference room, but it surely will by next month. This was part of our original plan to reduce the rent cost and also reduce the size of the area that we rented. So the understanding of the landlord with respect to that reduced rent was that he could recapture some of the property or some of the space that we had used in phase. And that's what's going on. Construction's going on now, and will continue for the next couple of months. But we will then be able to come back in here and use this room, but smaller. So next month and the following year, otherwise, will be virtual only. Most everybody got the word this time. Javi's over here, but I think he came over here because he wanted a place to hide. Anyway,
Trying to.
yeah. Everybody else got it, and welcome to everybody. With that, we'll go to the first item on the agenda, which is the monthly meeting minutes, the previous meeting of April 14th. Any questions or comments? Hearing or seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve them. We're going to have to sort of be aggressive because we're almost everybody is on the video.
Moved by Sean Parr.
Second by Kabute.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Any further comments? Seeing or hearing none? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. That gets us to the monthly billing summary, the requisition. Kim
Yeah.
Mitchell.
All right, so we have payment to Anshin totaling $10,344, payment to Bond, Shonik and King totaling $10,553.50, payment to Labella Associates for $617,500, LaChase Construction Services for $28,521.02, Savin Engineers for $315,937.42, Sealer Engineering for $6,201.25, SWBR Architecture Engineering and Landscape Architecture PC for $272,887.75, and lastly, Watts Architecture and Engineering for $100,410.70. Total payments of $1,362,355.64. Any questions?
Questions or comments? Hearing or seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the requisition as presented.
I'll move it.
Been moved. We need a second.
Second by Sean Parr.
Thank you, Sean. Any further questions or comments about the requisition? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Stands as carried. Okay, that gets us to the next item of business that we need to attend to, and this is continuing the story with respect to Edison. We've talked before, and you've authorized before, a detailed evaluation into the structural issues at Edison, issues that have existed for a long time, some of which were worked on in phase 2. And we're trying to develop a plan and some sense of what needs to be done. So with that, well, I guess Pepin, you can start us off here.
Yes, sir. So for this second fund transfer from East to Edison Tech, the evaluation of the Edison Tech superstructure, specifically the post-tension tendons in the waffle slabs, has been completed by the structural engineer that was retained by the board for this specialty work last December. That report was reviewed extensively last month by our PM team, the school district's facilities department, the RJSCB chair and vice chair. A copy of that report was included in your board packet, and it's displayed here as it is shown on the screen. So the findings of the report conclude that immediate short-term stabilization is not required. There's no imminent danger to the building right now. However, structural remediation and waterproofing of the foundations and tandem repairs are necessary, particularly in the loading dock and garage areas. The structural engineer, SGH, that was retained, recommends a two-tiered approach to addressing the necessary structural work at Edison. The tier one work needs to be implemented with this phase 3 of the FMP. This includes the supplemental steel reinforcement below the about 24,600 square foot of the loading dock and garage floor, repairs to the post-tension tendons, waterproofing of the post-tensioning system. It also includes installation of an acoustic monitoring system to locate future failures of the post-tensioning system until there's a sufficient amount of money to address those potential future failures. This tier one work is about $11 million plus some additional contingencies that Terry and Rolly have included. So the resulting budget adjustment brings Edison Tech from 102.7 million up to 114 million. You'll see that in the a couple of other documents we're going to present tonight. And the East budget went from 26.5 million since the first transfer to 10 million. That's pretty much where we are. So we're asking the board to approve or consider the budget transfer so we can move forward with the Edison Tech project. And Terry did a good job working with the district's facilities department as far as rescoping the East project down to what's essentially necessary, which is mostly roofs and some piping work in the basement.
Yeah, maybe we could give, you or Terry could give the board some sense of the changes that were made at East.
So in a nutshell, the work that's left at East that can be funded are some roof work that was in the BCS, the Building Condition Survey. There's condensate pump receivers down in the crawl space that are creating problems for the district. So those are on the list to be replaced. And in some cases, the new ones will be located in a different location so that any future problems would not affect other systems. There's some drainage work, additional sump pump. So some mechanical work down in the crawl space, the mechanical tunnels. The freight elevator needs replacement. It hasn't worked in a year and the parts are obsolete. They can't get them. So we've got that slated. And then there is some additional work that they would like to have done, but exceeds the budget. So what we're talking about doing is having the architect look into those as add alternates. Some additional roof work that wasn't part of the BCS that's aged the same as the work that we would be replacing. And also some lighting down in the crawl space area. Actually changing the rest of the building out from fluorescents to LEDs is what the facility will have done. So they'll be looking into that, and any money that's available could go towards those.
The it's pretty obvious, and we've talked about it before, that the structural work at Edison has to be done. It is one of those items that can no longer be put off. So that means we've got to get the money from someplace. Because we are up against, as we've discussed a number of times, an absolute number with respect to the total expenditure. And we have budgets for everything. We went to East for that purpose because we've already spent a great deal of money at East and done a lot of work at East. So it's not as though they haven't been modernized in any way. The second reason for it is there are parts of the East project now which are largely infrastructure but need to be done. Things like roofs and the stuff that Terry had answered here, stuff that affects the operation of the building and the functioning of the building. It is not as observable to somebody who looks at it from outside, but they are a bare minimum of what we need to do. So as we go through this, if we get more money, in other words, if betting and shows us a better possibility and there's some other sources or something else, we'll have done the planning to add things back into East. But for now, it's the place where the judgment has been that it's the best place to take it from. And the district supports that. That decision was made in a cooperative manner. And really, basically the district's decision, since they're the ones who have to live with it. So that's where we are and why we're doing what we're doing and why this is being brought to you now. We'll get going, as you'll see here later on the design and other work at East soon. So we'll know sooner rather than later what the final numbers will be. Okay, any questions or comments about this? I want to apologize for including the full report. That wasn't a trick to try to see if you would read it. I had this idea, which Mitchell has pointed out was stupid, that you would see how much work was done here and how carefully this was thought through. And I guess it does that if you painfully look through the hundreds of pages that I gave you. So I apologize for that. But this was a major effort. We got serious about this and spent significant money, hired a specialist in this area. So we had people who had really something to contribute beyond the general design. And we feel confident we have a plan now, albeit an expensive one. Okay, other things, comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the change in the budget as outlined in the material submitted.
I'll move that.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Other comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Next couple of items here, we'll have to vote for them individually, but the next couple of items relate to getting the rest of the design process and the construction management process underway for the projects for which we haven't done that. As Pepin will be discussing later, we've got some information from SED that makes this more important. We feel that we have to get going on this sooner than we thought before because of the regulatory requirements that will go with it. And also it's time, it's time to have the expertise in place. And as you can see from what we had to do with the Edison and East, we're rapidly getting to the point in the total project where lots of things are going to have to be going on at the same time. So that's why this is coming up now. We're not selecting an architect or a construction manager. We're just authorizing us to go out and solicit proposals. So the first of those is number 4, which is for East. And it's to hire an architect to do the design work for East High. So there's a motion to approve that.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Jesse.
I'll second.
Yes, been seconded. Comments or questions about it? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Item number 5 is for East as well, and it's the same program. This, however, is the construction manager will assist us with the management of the construction and the costing. Same discussion with respect to the previous item. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the RFP for the construction manager at East.
I'll move it.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. And now the last two in this item here are the first, the go out for an AE selection on Douglas, the last of our projects. That's item number 6. We'll entertain a motion to approve that.
I'll move it.
Second.
Seconded, thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Pass. And the last item of action here is the for Douglas as well, and it's the construction manager RFP. So I'll entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll move it.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Moved and seconded. The comments or questions? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, that gets us to the items of information. The bottom of the agenda. Funding status report. Jim, do you want to share anything with us there?
I don't believe we have anything for that particular line item.
Honey?
For that line item,
Yeah,
we don't have anything for that line.
okay. One thing I will report in that, respect to that, and Nick Jones can get there. We did, Kim presented and I assisted with a presentation to the city council committee, finance committee, with respect to the ban, the notes that we expect to issue here within a month, and we'll fund the program until we get to the point of using a regular bond. I thought that went well. There seemed to be good support on the city council for it. And so
Yeah.
we're-
Chairman Richards, I'd like to give you a great big thanks for your participation. I thought you did an excellent job of describing the work to be done at the various schools. The council members were very interested in a couple of schools, Edison in particular. You did a really good job, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah, it was interesting because, as you would expect, people were less interested in the financial proposal, which is what we're putting in front of them. And Derek, gets a pass, but they were interested in what was going on with the individual project, as you can imagine. And there are people on city council who went to these schools, who have allegiance to them, so it's understandable. And it's good, it's good that they're interested in it. And also that the school, the district itself had acted on this previously. We have a resolution that's been approved by them, which means once we get to the city council meeting, which I believe is on the 20th,
Yes.
assuming everything goes well there and it's reasonable to expect that, is most of the city council members attended the finance committee. We're ready to go with bond anticipation. We'll take care of our financing for a while. That, in the plan that we've gone over with. Okay, the ICO report, Action.
Good afternoon. So here's our the executive summary of the details of the work that was done as of all the documents that we received as of April 25th of this year, which were 97.37% of all the docs, which brings us to 99.55% of all the docs. We did have one contractor that was missing. We do have their documentation, and it just came in, and it'll be in next month's report. So we'll be back up to 100% of all required documents that we needed. So we currently, so far, there have been 25,661 hours worked on the project, of which 3,107 hours were performed during the month of March. The breakdown of those hours are minority hours worked, 1,097, non-minority women, 699 hours, non-minority male, 1,310 hours. When we compare overall, when we look at the comparison of our goals to hours worked, based on the overall project, minority, both male and female, our goal is 23%. We're at 45.71. Women, non-minority only, we have a goal of 7%, and we're at 10%. Comparison overall of hours worked with female participation broken out separately, minority, male only, goal of 23%, and we're at 31.17. Women, both minority and non-minority, a goal of 7%, and we're at 24.55%. To date, we've awarded $66,338,000 worth of contracts on the project so far. And when we compare that to where we are on goals, our MBE, we have a goal of 18%. We're currently at 30.66%, or a contract value of $20,338,000. Our WBE, we have a goal of 12%. We're currently at 4.39. We have contract values of $2,912,000. Our SBE, we have a goal of 2%. We're currently at 4% with $2,654,000. Our DBE, we have a goal of 2%, and we are currently at 0.66, which gives us 439,000 in contracts awarded so far. Although the project doesn't require a participation of the City of Rochester residents, we do track that so far. This month, there were currently 12 City of Rochester residents that were working on the project, which reflects 14.81% of the total of 81 individuals who worked on the project during March of 25. Any questions from anybody on the March data?
Brian, can you talk a little bit about the WBE and the DBE goals and the actual percentages?
Sure. So the goal, let's first start with the W, the goal at 12%, and we're at 4.39. That significant difference is driven, and Pepin and I have talked about it, is Pepin's has yet to award a W contract on the Savin side. That cures most of it because of the size of the Savin contract. So as to where we are, the DBE at 2% is an area that we are struggling in. We have historically struggled in that area. Some firms are both M or W or M and W and a DBE. You do have to select which one you're going to go with, so there's no double counting in it. But we do recognize that on the DBE side, this early on, that we are short. We should make up a significant amount of that shortage when construction starts and there's more opportunity that's there. Does that,
Thank you.
did I answer for you, Kimberly?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's important to remember that's true even in some of these categories that look quite good now. We're very early in the project, and so relatively small, significant differences here can change the percentage. But the real proof will be in the pudding once we start construction and we have significant numbers of people working on this project.
And to that point, once, we have this, Tom mentions the 475 million cap, we're at 66 million in awarded contracts. So as more and more contracts get awarded, that delta we'll see, can move significantly.
Brian, this is Kim Mitchell. Did you get a chance
Yes.
to out to the DBE that I gave you that information for last month?
I did. I spoke to Abner. He's sending over some information. We actually have a couple other opportunities for him as well, not only on this one, and some work that we're doing with them or doing for ESD that he's going to help me out on. But yes.
So that should help the DBE number if that contract gets awarded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Also, Ryan, in regards to the W and Savins contract, the board had authorized some of our alternate services last month, and we are very close to awarding to DAC Consulting and other WBEs that were part of our team. So you will see those subcontracts shortly, maybe
Sure.
in a couple of weeks when Rick Stoffel comes back from Zimbabwe. You'll see those subcontracts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kim, the fund balancer, this is what I was referring to when I
Oh.
asked you if you had anything to say. But you want to point some things out here?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Richards. So this is the budget tracking for our fiscal year for the contracts that the RJSCB is specifically responsible for. And as you'll see, we are pretty much under budget for all of the vendors, except for Landsman, which we had some unexpected expenses, but they will not be on the updated budget report. This will be renewed in July when the RJSCB creates its new budget for the fiscal year. So just again to point out that the budgets are located here. Our vendors are below budget for this fiscal year. As the program progresses, you'll see these numbers change in the July board meeting. We'll be presenting the updated fiscal year budget. Then on to the balance report. The last disbursement was still the $3 million on March 27th. That brought the account balance to $2,425,739.88. When the current pay requisition is deducted from that, that leaves a balance of $1,063,384.24. One thing you will notice is that the approved advance number has changed to the $14,635,000 that was loaned from the district. We have expended $10,414,350 to date, leaving a balance of $4,220,650. And that is designed to get us to the band. Once we get funded by the band, that number will change. We have the RJSCB held funds of $330,648, which are AG funds. We have not expended anything from that, so it hasn't changed. The RJSCB only expenses, which are the the audit and the actually the insurance for the board, that has not changed, $17,986. Our changes come down in the RSMP admin expenses, which are the three vendors, Savin Engineers, Anshin, and Bond, Shonik and King. Expenditures up to date of $5,456,187, which is 13% of the budget. And then the RSMP construction costs, which at current are only soft costs, of $4,940,177 against a budget of $439,342,158. Again, if you combine the budgets for these two charts, you will come up with the $475 million for the program. That's it.
Again for Kim. Hearing none, then I think we can move on to the program manager's report.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as the overall program budget versus cost summary, there are still no hard costs expended to date until construction starts. You won't see anything. As of last month, 8.23% of the total incidental budget was spent, or $10,414,350. With the current progress, the overall phase 3 program is 2.19% complete. So that's where we are, and this sheet will continue to be updated with the board's decision to accept our recommendation to move money from East to Edison. You'll see here the total for Edison is still showing 26, for East 26.5. that will change to 10 million for next month. And then you'll see Edison going to the amount we stated earlier, which is about 114 million, but we'll see that next month. Going to the next, there are no questions here. I'll go to the next section of the report. The SCD submission updates, the revised financial plan is still with the state controller, waiting approval. Responses to additional questions from the OSC regarding the anticipated method of payments for CAPI, capitalized interest and local share. Those answers were provided. We are waiting for the controller to react to the responses that were sent to them. Of course, the controller will consult with SCD first before they provide an opinion on approval on phase volume 2 of the strategic plan, which is the financial plan. Schematic design documents were submitted to SCD 3 months ago for MLK Junior number 9 school, along with program verification reports for Wilson and DF school at Franklin. The MLK submission was reviewed by SCD. A review number was assigned, and we met with SCD last Tuesday, and we're preparing responses to their review comments. The meeting was attended by several people at SCD's Facilities Planning Bureau. Here, the board chair, vice chair, our state manager, Mr. Alicer, and the school districts, finance folks, and many others. It was a very productive meeting. I'm going to tag team with Terry to show the impact of certain decisions that were made. So there is a file that I believe we sent to you. Kim, if you could find that for us, we can speak to what the impact of the statements that were made last Tuesday.
So following our meeting, there were several things that came out of the meeting that we tried to capture and digest and compare to the schedule that we were working from. Off the schedule.
I have to make sure I switch to the right.
So so one other items. How is there?
So what we did was if you look under each of the projects, the construction bars, we did a bar for each different scenario for what we learned from SED to see what the impact was. So that dark blue bar with the white lettering on it, that's last month's schedule update that we were working from. What we had learned was that SED originally, we had 2 weeks for review and approval at each stage of each submission stage of design. And SED had mentioned that with some advance warning, they could commit to picking up the submission to start a review, but never committed on how long that review would be, but it wouldn't be completed within a 2-week period. So we've extended those 2-week durations in the schedule to be 6-week reviews, 2 weeks to pick it up and 4 weeks to review and issue their response. So that had an impact within each project, and you see what that meant for each review and how those construction bars slid. The next bar below that is where SED, had reinforced where they do not want to see us advancing design without the previous stage of design approved by them. Originally, if it was only a 2-week review, architects were taking it upon themselves to keep pushing the design because 2 weeks is not a long duration. But as soon as that becomes 6 weeks, then the design they need to work on could be at risk with SED's review. So we put relationships into the schedule to show the waiting for SED's approval for the next stage of design. And you can see how that affected the construction lighting out a little further. Last item was, originally we were under the direction and impression of each project standing on its own for aidability, so that we could submit, show that that particular project it meets the 95% aidability, we can get approval and then continue on the design completion. What SED informed us of is that they're now looking at this in an aggregate sense. Now, although that's an advantage to us financially, where we get to share the aidability between projects, it also means that they want to see the preliminary submissions for all 6 projects, or they'll approve the first project to show that to them that the whole program is 95% aidable. So that's what prompted, you heard Chairman Richards mention earlier, we're having to advance and accelerate the procurement of the architectural design services and the CM services for our last 2 projects. Originally, we weren't going to go out to RFP until October, but since they need to see the preliminary submissions for those 2 projects in order to approve our first project, we needed to accelerate that so we can get the preliminary work done and submitted to SCD as quickly as possible. And that's what that orange bar represents, the effect of that. Now, most of these jobs sliding a little bit doesn't mean much, except for Wilson, as you've always known from the beginning, because of the shared swing space. Wilson and Douglas is the long path through the whole program. We need Wilson to finish and get out of the swing space that they'll be in, so that it can be vacated and allow Douglas to go in and use that swing space, so that we can finish Douglas as the last project. So we'll actually be, with the advance of the design for Douglas, we'll actually be able to, you'll see it as a red square for long lead equipment procurement. We'll actually be able to award construction contracts in order to procure long lead equipment. So we don't need to wait for that during the during the construction period, but we'll be waiting for swing space during that whole period of over a year, until the swing space frees up when Wilson finishes, and then we're able to start in 29. We were originally starting Douglas in the summer of 28, and now we won't be able to, on this plan, we wouldn't be able to start till the summer of 29. So it's a full year extension and delay to the program.
Thank you, Terry. Well, with that said, we can certainly share with your approval, Chairman Richards, this file with others. But this clearly shows that we are past 2031. And in our discussion with the State Education Department, 2031 is to submit a report on progress of the work, not necessarily the very end of phase 3. So this shows that this program will extend past even 2032. So that's why Terry and our team went through this exercise.
Yes, I think depending upon how these scenarios play out with SED in terms of work in hand, because they do have a bunch of submittals in Albany, we should be prepared that architects could be delayed and have claims for destaffing, restaffing. So that's an unforeseen additional cost that we'll have to see how it plays out depending upon that duration.
Captain, this is Ron. I have a question. On your previous document, you were talking about SED had two questions. Do we know what they are or were that they wanted answered? Yes. It
They
said something about they had two questions. You guys wanted a response and you guys were going to come back with a response. What, in simple terms, what were those questions?
We had submitted questions to SCD back in January. We also asked for a meeting to meet with them to go over our questions. One of them was a form that the statute says needed to be provided by the Commissioner of Education. SCD was able to provide that form, an attestation, in the form of an attestation to us. So that was one item. The second one is really to confirm if the schematic documents would be accepted by SED. In essence, the questions were from us. SED responded to those questions, and we are now reacting to comments we received as a result of the meeting we had last Tuesday with SED.
Okay, does this last question that they answered? I mean, I just heard Terry talk about these deltas now with regards to SED approval. They're saying that the design schematics have to be approved first before you move forward, correct? And that's why we're seeing these deltas?
That is correct. So SED says until we submit a preliminary submission to them, the schematic design for all 6 projects, they will not be able to calculate the overall edibility for the entire program. At first, we were asked to consider each project independently to meet the 95% edibility. But because School 9 is a struggle for them, because we're not at 95 according to SED, we believe we are, but SED says we're not. So they are not accepting us moving to the 25%, which is the next milestone, until all 6 projects are reviewed by them and they provide feedback to RJSCB on edibility for all 6 projects as an aggregate versus individual.
Okay, so then, I mean, it just seems like we've got a snowball here because I heard Terry talk about now the long lead items, and then I think I heard you, Pimpin, mention now we're going to, or maybe Chairman Richards, we're going to accelerate the architect schedule to try and compensate a little bit to these deltas, right? To try and catch up or try and play catch up based on Terry's new Gantt chart, right?
If you recall, last month and the month prior, we said the RFPs for architectural and construction management services would not be released by the RJSCB until October. We don't have an architect, we don't have a CM for the last 2 projects. And until they are on board, we're not able to prepare documents, which requires program verification, to go in buildings and do a check against the strategic plan, confirm the scope, and we're not going to be able to provide SED with a schematic design for them to review until those professional services are procured and until they're on board. So that's the reason for accelerating this procurement. I was mentioning.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Got it. Okay. Yeah.
So I do have a question. So as far as the completion, as far as the project timeline completion, so the legislation says that the projects have to be completed by June 30th of 2031. So how does that impact, the legislation?
Well, we thought all along that was the case and have been proceeding on that case. And quite frankly, we feel that's what it says. But SED, who's their lawyer who participated in the call, has interpreted that not as a final date when you have to complete the projects, but a date by which you have to submit certain reports. with respect to the progress of the work and other things. That's new. That's one of the things that came out of this call that surprised us. I don't know that it does us any good to argue with them about it, but it is not the principle on which we've been proceeding and the one we feel makes sense here, but it's not a neutral decision. Because if you take the year 31 off the table, everything slides. What SED is pressured to do slides. What we're pressured to do slides, and that costs money. So if you add a year or a year and a half to the total program, you're going to add a substantial amount of money. And you're going to do it at a time when the design is partially completed. So it's not necessarily good, even though it sounded that way when you first heard it. That's one of the things we're going to have to work on here. How do we mitigate that? Because the other risk here is that we get in a situation where the people who are doing this work, particularly the design people doing the work, are sitting around waiting for this process to get to them. And that'll cost us money. That'll cost us money to happen. Even our own internal process here, program manager and so forth, are all based on that date. So I'm a little confused as to where the hell that came from, quite frankly, but that's what we're having to cope with now. Because remember, when SED establishes these policies with respect to these items, until we can talk them out of it, they apply. And we have to deal with them. If you look at this sort of summary of this thing, what happened, first of all, the call was very useful and the people on it were polite and supportive on both sides. So it wasn't a contentious process, but it has created some significant problems. The things that changed were this idea that the 95% requirement of aidability can now be viewed at the total stage, phase 3, not just individual project. That helps because it's easier to do some schools and meet the 85 or 95, not. But it brought along with it something that really is going to be a problem, and that is that nothing goes forward until everything is approved with schematic design. That has the potential for delaying the project. And so we're going to have to work on, and they've already started to work on, part of what you saw here with Terry, is how it is we respond to that and what we can get them to do in terms of giving us a little flexibility here to make sure we don't back ourselves into an expensive set of delays.
Would that cause the legislation, a need for the legislation to be amended if the project completion date or year changes?
Well, they say no. I mean, that's what I meant, Kim, when I said that they had a different interpretation of that. Their interpretation of that year, 2031, is it's not when the projects have to be finished. It's just when these reports have to be done. I know you're wherever you are, you're shaking your head at me, but
Yeah,
because
the proof is in the pudding, the legislation says, 2031.
And for me, it's not just, as I said before, it's not just that timing issue. It's the potential cost that brings with it, which is really more critical. I mean, if there was no cost consequence to extending beyond 2031, that makes it easy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come for free. So that's one of the things we're going to have to deal with here. Also, the other thing that was caused here, and Terry pointed it out, is the amount of time they're going to take to approve this stuff is now beyond 2 weeks. We have 6 in the plan process here. That has the same impact. It extends things, pushes them out. People can say, well, now 2031, you've got the time to do it, but all of that costs money. And all the money we spend on that kind of thing is money we don't spend on the construction. The things we don't get done. So there is a consequence here. We could make it all come out, if it was just numbers, but obviously there's some significance to that. So what came out of the meeting? I mean, what, the good thing that came out of the meeting, we got an answer to some. So Pepin, don't ask any more questions. But, you know, we did, and to be fair to them, they worked on it. But there are consequences to those decisions we got. We're gonna have to start working our way through it. And hopefully.
If you know that there's gonna be some extra costs, let me know immediately, so I can facilitate some discussion with the
We will.
department.
We're working on that right now. Working on that right now. It really, as you can tell, it affects our whole plan here. So that's where we are in that part of the deal.
They also said that there is some discussion about getting more legislation to increase. Does that mean that probably the date will also could be changed at that time?
Yeah,
So,
it is. There is legislation that the district has been pushing, you know, that would extend the amount and the time. That has been done in some of the other locations. It was done in Syracuse.
Yep.
That was motivated not so much by this situation we just described for you, but by the fact that everything has gotten so much more expensive and this stuff has been delayed. But everybody's having the same problem in terms of getting done what they originally planned to do for the time and the money that's available. That would help, yes, that would help. That would help because it not only extends the time, but it funds it. It also is interesting because SVB is right about the timing that we need. We'll see.
I had a question. I have a question coming out of that meeting about the calculation of aidability. And what I see is a disconnect between how the district uses its capacity of its buildings versus how the facilities department and NICED is going to calculate. And that came up as an example in that meeting about MLK, School 9. And I'd be kind of interested, Pepin, as you go through that, because one of the things they talked about was that they had excluded 4 classrooms because whatever the enrollment projections the district was putting into that building was less than capacity, and those 4 classrooms they excluded. That's problematic for the calculation of aidability, but it also becomes that's just an elementary school. When you get into Wilson and specifically Padilla, that's extremely problematic because the district has a stated goal to put no more than 1,000 kids into a high school, irregardless of capacity of the building. So I've always thought that was problematic, and depending on how NICED views it, it could be really problematic from getting approval for moving forward on some of these projects.
Yes, Sean, you are correct. And I spoke with Steve Rebels over the weekend, the master plan architect. And in our discussions, one of the issues we saw is that NICED, or if he's mistaken, the enrollment projections for number 9 that the demographer had projected for the school, and it was actually the projected enrollment for students living in a neighborhood. So Dr. Terry Arden is working on a response. I think he shared those responses with Chief Scott. So we all, as Chairman Richard mentioned, working on a document that shows the disconnects and where we think the disconnects are. So once we have that, we'll run it by the district, Dr. Strickland, et cetera, and hopefully Jaime to help us kind of close the gap. There's a big gap. They're saying the number 9 is 82% aidable versus the 95% that we had calculated. There's definitely a disconnect, definitely a problem. And I agree, we need to close that gap. And the sooner we do it, the better. The other thing we'd like SED to help us with is to not wait for 2 months before we check in again, because number 9 calculation of the BAU, the building 8 units, and Wilson will determine, rightfully, how you said it, what happens to the other projects. And if we have a problem with, like, for example, study halls, if they're not able at the secondary level, and if we don't get aid for 4 pre-K classrooms at number 9, there's a problem, and there's no reason not to take those spaces. So we'll sit down with them. We'd like to meet with them sooner than later, review the documents together, and show our calculations versus these calculations to close the gap.
Well, I'm concerned because I think potentially there's some solutions to school 9, but I've always been concerned. This is a conversation that I had with the previous superintendent as they were developing Invest Tomorrow, that if you have a building, well, first of all, they have buildings that are high schools that are not used as high schools. So Thurgood Marshall is an example. It was built to be a high school and it's used as a middle school with minimal enrollment. So you're way under the capacity of that building. And then as you look to redo Padilla, which is a huge building with huge capacity, and if you only put 1,000 kids in that building, how does PD react to that? Those are the issues that I'm concerned about, because the district closed some schools, but it's still way over capacity, the instructional capacity of all its school buildings versus the students that are put into the buildings. And so at the heart of that, I guess we need to know sooner than later how NYSERD's going to react to that.
It'll come up right away because it comes up in school 9, the first project going through. So you're absolutely right, Sean. That's going to be an issue we have to wrangle with all the way through this project, and it's coming up right off the bat in terms of population.
Regarding what he's bringing up, the district is having us look at 1,400 for those big high schools, not the 1,000 that was in the strategic plan. So that is a change in approach from the district side. So Edison, East, Padilla, they're looking at 1,400 for each of those schools.
Well, the problem is that, and I don't know what the numbers are right now, but there's approximately 6,000 students in grades 9 to 12. And if you start upping, because I had suggested time you needed to put like 1,500, 1,400, whatever. But if you actually put 1,400 into its major facilities, then you have buildings that are virtually unutilized. So like Thurgood Marshall's is an example. How does the state react to putting money into redoing Padilla and Wilson when you've got a high school building that's, by the way, built out, and you're putting, and I don't know how many middle school kids are in there, 400 kids, whatever it is, in a building that could hold, and I don't offhand remember the capacity of Thurgood Marshall, but let's say 1,600, 1,700, 1,800 students. How does the state, because they're looking for enrollment of overall, not just the 6 projects, but they're going to want to see all the enrollment and projections for all the buildings in the district. And then when if you start actually putting in larger numbers into Padilla, at East Edison, then there's only 6,000 plus students in those grades, and all of a sudden you're going to have buildings with way underutilized, because the district has a lot of buildings it uses for various high school programs. Anyways, I mean, that's always been a concern for me, but I think what I was taking away is we're now at that point, and MLK was an example, kind of the leading example, but that's the only elementary school the thing, and that's easier to address because it's a large elementary school, but the district could put enrollment into that building to address the issue. But when you get into the high schools and the overcapacity district-wide of the high school built, the buildings designated as high schools versus the number of students, you have a significant overcapacity overall, and how that's gonna play out is a concern. And I guess you'll know how that works as you work through school 9. So that'll be kind of the leading example. But then from that, you'll know, what kind of situation you're looking at.
Yeah, I just want to add too. I mean, Sean brings up some very poignant, concerns. I think from the district side, we have to look at, like, in instance for Padilla, like, look at some of our programs that we're leasing space for, and probably moving programs over to the Padilla campus, where of course we're gonna have to, and I think it was in the plan to close additional buildings that aren't going to be utilized down in the future. So I know there is something a little different for the East EPO, and I know Dr. Orden is working on, and I think there's communication or emails going back and forth now in regards to what that EPO projected enrollment number is. So I'm not sure if East would fall into that, but certainly our other schools like Padilla and also MLK as well. But that's where us as a district has to look at overall programming within the district and see where we'll best utilize students. And unfortunately, we'll probably have to close some additional buildings.
This problem that we were talking about, and Sean makes a good point in the sense that the underlying problem that exists here is the ability to project how many kids you're going to have in a declining environment in which the numbers are going down steadily. How do you project what the numbers are? Is it going to flatten out? We get to a point where we no longer have this decline, we get to a hardcore, or is it going to keep going? Is it going to turn around in some way? When you have numbers that are as critical as these are, where they're clearly more than forcing the facilities decision, those kind of judgments are really important, and they're not easy, by the way. It's not like it's a simple math issue that you can deal with. But, it's one thing to say we're going to put 1,000 or 1,500 kids into this school. It's another thing to have them, to put in the school. When you look at the totality of the other facilities, so this can't be a pea under the walnut shell game here. It has to really get to reality. And I know the district's working on it, and they're clearly aware of the problem. And I'm sympathetic, and it's not easy to deal with, but it's going to get forced, I think. Okay, what else have we got?
There's just probably one more comment that should be, added. Yes, as I stated earlier, that we should be on the alert that there could be delays and claims from our architects, but if there is additional time or money added to legislation, when that money hits is obviously just as critical, because you have a design process underway. And do you redesign? Do you stop? So that's another variable in this whole equation that needs to be known sooner than later, just to strategize how you're going to deal with scope. As we've seen in each of the projects thus far, compared to the strategic plan, very, very considerable scope had to be reduced to stay within the budget for other reasons, escalation primarily, and availability of materials. But the timing of that money is just as critical.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I saw that there was a cities to committee meeting at the Senate today, but hopefully that bill is moving through committees, and the assembly would put a companion bill together to make sure this gets done sooner or later. So all this problem can be solved.
Our problem.
So
Well, it also, the very existence of that legislation raises the issue we just finished talking about.
Right.
You know, what are the demographics of the district that would justify additional expenditures? Okay, what else have we got here?
Well,
How about some good news here? What do you got?
as far as good news, we're very happy that you authorized the release of those RFPs. We really can't talk much about the design until you know what we're doing with the preliminary submissions. The PLA draft agreement, once that's approved by you, will get CEDA to review it with the Rochester Building and Construction Trades Council to get their input on that. Terry went through the schedule, so we won't do another update until we know more, right, learn more. As far as other items, we're very grateful for the RJSCB, the school district, and city council for approving issuing of a ban. So I'll attend the May 20th meeting in case we have questions. That time for the full council meeting. So the short-term financing is going to be very important for us going, because I understand that the loan is about to be exhausted right at the time we're closing on the short-term note. As far as the refunding opportunity bill, I still don't have an update. I don't know, Derek, if you have an update.
At the moment, Mario is looking into it, so we should have something soon.
That'd be great, yeah, before the session closes this year. It'd be nice to get that done. That pretty much concludes my report, Mr. Chairman, unless you have other
Questions for Pepin? Other items to come before us? Anybody virtually? Seeing or hearing none? We will stand adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Everyone,
Thank
have a
you.
good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.